So good day, friends. This is Dr. Bob Hamilton, and you have tuned in today to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. We're going to talk about a big collision with kids today. We're going to talk about travel, and I'm going to introduce my guest in a moment, but I want to thank you, friends, for tuning in today. I appreciate your time. I know that you're busy people, and the fact that you tune in, hopefully on a weekly basis, means a lot to me. So thank you for your time. If you like what you hear, tell your friends, write a nice note about us on Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. That means a lot. We're trying to build an audience. And the reason I'm trying to build an audience is because the people who come on my show are without without doubt incredible people. They're accomplished people, and they have something to say. And today is going to be an exciting show because we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is travel. I love to travel. And the guest I have on today, his name is Chris Lefevre. He is a vice president, executive travel guy with a company called BCD Travel. They're a very large travel company. They do a lot of corporate travel. And Chris, I want to welcome you to the Hamilton Review.
Dr. Bob, thank you so much for having me, and definitely excited to be here and to talk about, definitely, if it's not number one, it's among the very favorite topics in my life.
And I can say amen to that because I happen to be a person who, as a kid, Chris, I never had an opportunity to travel. I was one of those kids that we just never had the financial ability to do much traveling when I was a kid. But now I get to travel, and I have to say I love to travel. Um, so, Chris, I like to start out my show by asking my guests to tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, your background, how it was that you became interested in travel. By the way, I have to say that Chris is married. He's got 4 children, one, two, three, four. He's almost catching up with Dr. Bob. You got 2 more to go, Chris, if you want to
Yep.
really catch up with me. Most people don't take on that
I
challenge.
think we are whole at 4.
Happy with 4. Okay. Well, I would have missed Emily and Hannah if I stopped at 4. But listen, we all have our journey in life, right?
If it
So,
depended on my wife, Deanna, she would keep going, but I think we decided a grand total of 6 humans and 1 furry is plenty under this roof.
one furry, yeah. We never got furries until a little bit later on, so maybe that would have changed the dynamics. So, listen, Chris, I want to give you the microphone, but first of all, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure thing. Thanks again, Dr. Bob. So great to be here. My name is Chris Lefevre. As you introduced me, Dr. Bob, I'll be the travel guy for today. We've gotten to know each other through the Lighthouse community here in Santa Monica. I've been in this part of the world for the better part of 20 years. But to tie the personal background into the topic with travel, I like to say that I was born and raised in travel. I was born in Paris, France. My last name suggests a little bit of the French background, but my mom is American, born and raised in Long Island, New York. Met my dad in France through her coming out of college years, and had my sister Juliette and I. And naturally, they thought, okay, it's not enough to have a French dad and an American mom. Let's go move to Canada. So one year old, we followed my dad's career to Toronto for 3 years, followed by, hey, let's go to Montreal for 3 years. And by the way, the company needs him in New York, so let's go to New York for 2 years. And then let's go back to my dad's and my birth country, France. And so I lived in France between the age of 9 and when I moved to California, which is when I was 23.
Wow.
So again, born and raised, traveled a lot. My mom always insisted, if you will, regardless of available finances, she always found some kind of a gig in the travel industry that allowed us to get on planes. And she was a radio broadcaster for Air Canada as a consultant for them when we lived in Canada, and that got us a couple of trips to Florida for free. And then when we were in New York City, I remember she pulled us out of school one day and said, we're going on a helicopter tour over Manhattan, again for free, because she had gotten a press pass. So, it's in my DNA.
Indeed. Wow. That's amazing. I guess I didn't realize that you were actually you're obviously Lefebvre is a French name, but I mean there are a lot of people who have French names who were not born in Paris. So there you go. Um, so that was your introduction to travel. You felt comfortable even as a young child around big airplanes and airports and hotels and things like that.
With the exception of on that trip to Florida, or one of the trips to Florida where I thought we wouldn't make it from Miami to Key West in a tiny plane with the biggest turbulence I've experienced in my life. Yes, very comfortable on trains, planes, automobiles, you name it.
Yeah, I'm sure on a small plane with turbulence, that's terrifying. And I certainly have been in those situations. I think the first time I ever flew a big airplane, we had some serious turbulence, and I remember never have been in a jet airplane before. I thought, okay, this is the end of it. But here I am, okay,
Yeah.
after many airline flights. So you grew up traveling, and it got into your blood. Tell us a little bit about you. So you went to college. Tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that story, part of the story.
So as I was entering the later part of high school, I thought, well, I need to decide on what I'm going to do here. So while I had a passion for oceanography, marine biology, everything related to the ocean, I decided I wanted to use my language skills, and our parents always put us in international schools, so got to learn Spanish and decent Italian along the way in high school. And I decided and I always liked playing Monopoly. As a kid, I always liked to be the one buying all the hotels and the houses and winning. So I decided, hey, I'm going to combine my love for, call it, different countries and cultures and languages with my love for business. So I got an international business degree in a school right outside of Paris, coming out of high school. And out of the 4-year undergraduate program, 2 of the years were at that campus. 1 year was a foreign exchange program at San Jose State University. And then the 4th year was an internship at a large global corporation called Nestle, the chocolate company, among other things. And so international business really felt like the right fit. And I'll fast forward to a few years after college. I decided I wanted to live in California, where my mom had moved at that time. Deanna and I had started dating, and she had a film studies degree, a master's degree, and we were converging towards California for many different reasons. And even though at the beginning of my venture in California, I started, believe it or not, as a spa salesman and dealer through my stepdad, and that's a separate story we don't need to cover today. I decided one day to apply for a position as a travel agent, a travel consultant for a large company called Flight Center,
Yeah,
in our
sure.
neck of the woods in Santa Monica and Venice. And that kicked off my first gig. They were very interested in my profile, my background in both travel and business. And so I started as a junior travel consultant in the Flight Center Venice Beach in July of 2006.
Yes, and so I we know Flight Center because there was a Flight Center on Wilshire Boulevard in Santa Monica until it closed a couple of years back. But okay, so that makes it okay. Because friends, let me just say one thing. Chris has been very helpful to my medical travels around the world. He's been a tremendous blessing to us, really. And even though he doesn't do private travel per se, he's more in the corporate world now. But that makes I now see how we found each other. It was through Flight Center.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah. So Chris, I have a I there are the travel engages a lot of different things, and I have to say that I've always been a encourage my families to travel, and just from a pediatric perspective, I think that kids can start traveling pretty young. In fact, I one time I wrote a book one time, and one of my secrets I tell people in my book, the book is entitled Seven Secrets of the Newborn. I think you know that book. Anyway, one of my secrets is when babies are young, travel with them because that's a great time to travel. I usually tell people not to leave home before 2 months of age, because by 2 months of age, they have received their first go round of vaccines. So they're reasonably protected. They're getting out of that, what we call the neonatal period, and they're getting stronger and much more able to go get into public without too much danger. This was and this actually does still apply to the COVID era that we're living in.
Mhm.
But so I'm curious to know, first of all, your thoughts about kids and travel.
Oh, again, you're speaking my language, Dr. Bob. I'll say as a quick response at a high level that I agree with you. Kids should travel as soon as their doctors say they can. We are advocates of that, and I'll turn it into a bit of a story. So, being now officially in the travel industry, working on the leisure side, when my first child was born in 2008, Sophie, my wife and I were very fortunate to take advantage of me working in that segment of the industry. I would go to events, I would go to conferences, I would go to all these different events where airlines were very eager to ask us to put a business card in a hat. And hey, if you're the lucky one whose business card is drawn, you get a free trip to anywhere in the world in business class. So, not that that happened every day, it happened a couple times. And so, Sophie, from a very young age, traveled overseas. Her first trip, she was 6 months going to Florida and the Bahamas. Got either an agent rate or free hotel stay at the Four Seasons at the time. And then at one of the events where they did pick up my business card, we were fortunate to take her to Argentina at a very young age, as well as to New Zealand with Uncle Paul, who lives out of Miami. And so it was definitely we decided we want to take advantage of our love of travel and the fact that we can afford it, thanks to my profession, to get her on the road. And she was really the best young child you could ever choose to travel with. I wouldn't necessarily recommend taking very young children to such far destinations, especially if there's more than one. We
Yeah.
were very grateful. She was great. She could sleep, but I wouldn't necessarily. We chose not to once we had the boys, shortly thereafter, to go on those types of extensive journeys with multiple kids. I think there is a different approach based on the kids' ages and what their interests are and the logistics. Because most people are pretty excited about getting on a plane. But once you're on it, there's only one question that the kids keep asking is, when do we get there? Or are we there yet? So,
Yes, indeed. No, I do think that when you start getting multiple kids, that does change the whole perspective. I mean, definitely one kid, you have the ability to kind of maintain and watch them there, right? When you have multiple kids, that changes things quite a bit, actually. And so it's a little different. But no, I do think that you were pretty courageous there to jump on an airplane and fly all the way to Argentina and New Zealand. Was that one trip that you did
no,
that?
they were separate trips.
With separate trips.
And
Okay.
thankfully, the one where the generous airline was able to offer us lie flat business class seats was the Argentina one going through Miami. So it was very comfortable.
Yep.
In those cases, sometimes you say, no, I don't want to know when this flight is over. It's the opposite. Let's make it last even longer. And then, New Zealand out of LAX is a nonstop flight. It's an overnight flight. And as long as you tire, the children's get tired, we just had her run up and down the stairs in the airport waiting for the plane to board. As long as you think about how to get the child in the best possible position to sleep, on
Yep.
the airplane, a flight to New Zealand can actually go pretty fast, even in coach.
Yeah, my daughter, I had a daughter who flew to New Zealand after some final examinations at UCLA, and she was going down to visit a friend down there. And she literally got on the airplane, fell asleep, and did not wake up until the stewardess said, "Ma'am, we're here." And she slept. I think she was exhausted from her examinations, but I think she slept 17 hours or something like that in a row. It's crazy.
Wow,
But
amazing,
anyway, she made it. By the way, she felt fabulous, as you might imagine, when she got
outstanding.
Okay, so Chris, we're going to take a 1 minute break here. I want to come back to you. I have a couple specific questions to ask you, like great places to go with kids. So we're going to get to that. So friends, don't go away. We'll be right back.
The Hamilton Review podcast is brought to you by Hamilton Babies, 9 kid-friendly products designed for the little loves in your life. Find them at hamiltonbabies.com or amazon.com. Also consider Dr. Hamilton's recently published book, 7 Secrets of the Newborn, available at Barnes & Noble, your local independent bookstore, and amazon.com.
So friends, welcome back. Dr. Hamilton here. Welcome back to the Hamilton Review. We're having a great conversation today with Chris Lefevre. He is a VP travel executive with a company called BCD Travel. They do corporate travel. Chris, tell us a little bit about that job and what you actually do.
Sure thing, Dr. Bob. Thanks again, and I appreciate everyone listening to today's show. I'm enjoying it so far, and I hope it's the same with you. So, a lot of folks that I know ask me, "What do you do? You know, are you a travel agent booking cruises, vacations, and all that good stuff?" I say, while I have a passion for that and have actually been a proper travel agent in my career, the short of what I do now is we specialize at BCD Travel in supporting any travel related needs for large corporations. So large corporations such as Apple, Nestle, um, need a company to help them with all travel related requests. It can be, of course, the what you would expect, which is the booking element. So booking travel through a travel consultant on the phone or on chat or on email. But it can also be something that most folks don't necessarily think of, which is the duty of care component, which is to make sure that as an employer, when one of your employees are on the road, whether it's to visit a client, go on to a team meeting, a conference, or a supplier, that your employer knows where to find you, and that employer is ethically and even from a legal perspective able to offer not only the answer to the question, "Where are you?" So we can make sure that you're looked after, but to offer support if someone does actually need, for example, a medical assistance, even an evacuation in some more extreme instances. So those are two examples of what we do, and then it extends out to these days. One of the most strong client requests are around sustainability. So clients today really want to make sure that they are balancing their environmental impact when they get on the road and they travel on airplanes with other forms of ensuring a more sustainable approach to their business. So we offer a consulting arm just to help our clients in that regard. And then last example I'll share with you is wellness. Coming out of the last almost 3 years, people's stress level when getting on the road has increased just
Yep.
because of some additional anxiety. There's been a lot more purpose put around why and when should I actually get on the road versus jump on a call. And so we're very keen on helping our clients support their employees from a well-being perspective. So it's a very comprehensive approach. And just to give you an example of where we stand in the global marketplace, we are the second largest global travel company specialized in business travel.
It's amazing. Honestly, it's a big, and when you really think about the ramifications of travel and executive travel and getting people to the right places, for meetings and what have you, is actually that's a heck of an undertaking. I'm sure uh, your challenge. I'm sure you have plenty of challenges, and especially with weather things. I mean, I'm thinking about the Southwest debacle that happened about a month ago now.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine how many situations that really affected. And Southwest wasn't alone. There were a lot of other airlines who obviously had issues too. I'm actually, even a couple of weeks ago, we had a complete shutdown for a short time in the morning because of a computer or something. Can you? No, this is kind of off topic, but can you speak to that? What did
Sure
happen?
thing. I mean, it speaks to what you mentioned, which is we need to be ready to support travelers in the case of disruption. And, we've been seeing more and more disruption for many different reasons. To answer your question, it was a FAA outage. And it's funny you ask now because I think an hour or two ago, I read that it was labeled as a human error. I haven't gone any further, but what I can tell you is that people were stuck. If the plane had already boarded, they were grounded on the tarmac. And of course, from our perspective, we had to scale the operation to be ready to answer queries about missed connections, canceled flights, and
Sure.
that's a big part of what we offer, is to scale according to what the traveler needs. And again, situation like that underlines the fact that travel has always had a bit of a you need to be ready to go with the flow, and to be patient and calm, whether it's turbulence or other reasons. And that's really one of our top focus areas, is really that end-to-end traveler experience more than anything.
Yeah. No, I think when you travel, you do have to have a little bit of understanding that everything doesn't go exactly as planned. It certainly doesn't for me. So I asked the question before the break. Thinking about kids here. Um, Great places to go for kids. What is your thought about that?
Oh, we could talk for much longer than your podcast needs to be, Dr. Bob, because this is definitely a passionate topic for me, and very fortunate to have, with Sophie, Matisse, Tristan, and Robin, and with my wife, been getting them to travel quite a bit since they were born. We're very fortunate and grateful. So I think the answer is not certainly not a boxed answer. I think one is, it depends on the ages, right? So a toddler is probably, let's call it what it is, the more challenging traveler to bring with you on a trip.
Yep.
They're full of energy. You may take do the trick I mentioned earlier, having them run up and down the staircase as the plane is getting ready to board. But be ready for your toddlers to be the highest energy traveler, who may need you to carry them, especially on a long flight, and just kind of entertain them. So I would say for families listening with small kids, I would think, number one, try to find a place that isn't too far and that's fairly easy to get to and from. I think the kids will enjoy going to more remote destinations that might require one or two connections and a long total travel time. To, for example, if they're in high school, they might want to visit more cultural places, such as in Europe or even Asia, or more remote destinations. The young kids, I think you need to focus on getting somewhere that isn't too far, that's pretty easy to get to, and that allows the family to relax. Because I think for all the parents listening, we can use the analogy that the flight attendants bring up at the beginning of every flight, is you really need to put the oxygen mask on yourself before you hand it to the child. And I think that's valid for the vacation experience. Many of us work very hard, and the last thing you want is to come back from a vacation that may cost a significant amount of money, to say, wow, the travel alone was difficult, and then we got there and we over planned it. So go somewhere close. LAX, for those who are here, offers so many nonstop flight options. If you're in a more remote destination, try to go with something that's one stop max. And then really, with the young kids, I think, unless they have a passion for something very specific, in which case you can do more research on that specific thing that they love to do, I would just really focus on relaxing and going somewhere where nature is available to you, the beach, the rainforest, and just make sure that you have downtime and quality family time together, and don't overplan it.
Okay. Well, that's, you know what, Chris, that's exactly what I say with young kids. I tell people to go find a location, a house, a VRBO or a hotel, and chill. And don't go,
So
it's not the kind of time where you go, okay, if this is Tuesday, we must be in Belgium type of thing. That is not what you want to do. I promise you. You don't want to be moving every day, because that will, getting on an airplane or a train or whatever. I think you just want to find a destination, stay there, enjoy yourself. I like the idea of nature. It's good to be away, especially if you're a city family. It's nice to get out there and enjoy, the part, a lake or an ocean or whatever. That's kind of what we did. And I have to say, it worked really, really well. So we kind of went there, stayed there, came back. The travel wasn't as much of an issue. Later on, when the kids are bigger, you can go more exotic places for sure.
yeah, and
So
if it's okay, I know you had another question in mind, but I would just putting myself in the shoes of your audience, for those who are maybe contemplating their next trip, not sure where to go and for how long. Even those of us who have travel in our DNA. It's always a work in progress. My wife would tell you a year and a half ago when we went to visit family in France that, Sophie, our oldest child and only daughter, is now 13 or coming up to 13. But the boys are, 9, 6, and 2 or 3. So I was planning this trip to go visit family and friends in France, and I overdid it. We went to Paris, and then with my dad, we went to Brittany, which is in the northern western part of the country, back to Paris. And then let's go to the Mediterranean because my wife loves warm water. She's never seen Provence. So let's go all the way to the other side of the country. And then let's wrap it up kind of halfway at the old family house in the middle of the country, getting back to Paris. And while I think Sophie and Matisse were fine with that, heavy logistics, visit all these beautiful places, it wasn't the case for Robin and Tristan. And so my point is, we all, we all do our best, and don't kill yourself. Don't feel bad if you make mistakes on the way, but overall with the small kids, try to keep it simple. I'm still learning myself.
That does sound, unless you had about 3 months to do that, that does sound pretty busy planning. It sounds like something I would do, frankly, Chris. So don't feel bad. So a couple of you have a couple of specific places that you go. These are great places. Any like a handful of places that people with kids might want to visit.
Sure thing. So again, I'll probably provide a couple of tips based on age range. So I would say for families whose children or child is, let's just say, let's keep it wide here, 10 years or less. Of course, destinations that you can fly to nonstop, like Costa Rica. There's an overnight flight to San Jose. Get into the rainforest. It's very different from Southern California and most places in the United States, if not all, other than Puerto Rico. And it's a very rich experience with a lot of nature and, surfing if you like to catch waves. Of course, Hawaii is a wonderful place for families. It is not cheap when you get there in terms of the food. In particular, I think most people who've been know that. So just be ready to, if you're going to go to Hawaii, to plan a significant additional budget once you get there, because air and hotel is really only your starting point. So a good middle ground and a destination that offers a little bit of both is Mexico. We love to go down to Ixtapa, which is a 3.5-hour flight from us, and usually a one-stop connection for most cities in the US. And it's got great all-inclusive options where you don't need to worry about an additional budget for food when you get there. Lots of activities for the kids. We personally, or as a family, love staying at the Club Med down there. You really get a lot of value when you stay at an all-inclusive, but be careful because you have all-inclusives and you have all-inclusives. Some are high quality and you eat well and you don't feel nickel and dime in any way, shape, or form like at a Club Med, or even sailing is included, and archery and kids club. But you have other places in all-inclusive destinations, including but not only Mexico, that are, you get there and it's supposed to be all-inclusive, but there's a lot of upselling. Another option for all ages is cruising, where again, it's mostly all-inclusive, even though you will find that restaurants will add, reservation fees and things like that. But that's nice because you can visit multiple destinations in a fairly short period of time. I will say the only thing to keep in mind on cruises, and for moms, but also dads, you're on a large ship overlooking the ocean. And so if that creates angst, don't do it. Again, this is about chilling and enjoying yourself, but those are good options. And then for the older kids, we'll say 11 and above, all the way to high school, the world is your oyster. I say go to Europe if they haven't yet. If budget allows for it, consider travel to Asia, to Australia, New Zealand, South America, depending on your interest and willingness to go off the beaten track. And, I think if there are, back to a point I made earlier, Dr. Bob, if there is an area of passion, if your child's really into architecture or into archaeology or into classical music or surfing, I would take the time to research the best places to live that passion. And if they're older, again, in roughly that 10 plus range, I wouldn't worry too much about the logistics. Everyone will get there safely. And, while I don't recommend going to any place that requires significant travel any less than 3 nights, don't hesitate to do those multi-city trips if you're going to cross an ocean.
Yeah. No, I think when you get across the ocean, then you can jump around a little bit. But those are good. Those are great ideas. I think that really when you get to the point where when the world is your oyster, it actually does get really exciting because you can go to exotic places and my wife and I are doing more of that, which we love. Okay, I have a more philosophical question for you, Chris. I push travel all the time, and the one reason, and I like to travel personally, but I will tell my reason after I listen to your reason. So I'm a person off the street, and I walk up to you and I hear you're a travel agent, and I say, okay, Mr. Lefevre, why should people travel, and specifically, why should kids travel? What would you say?
I would say in a few words, it'll open up your world. That's a fairly straightforward place for me to go to, because the world, we just use the expression, the world is your oyster. But opening up your world can be at so many different levels. It can open up your awareness of the fact that you were born and raised in a certain place with a certain family, with a certain group of a certain community, group of friends and family. When you get on the road, you start realizing that, wow, even though, for example, that experience might be similar across, in our case, the United States, there are different experiences as soon as you discover new places. And that awareness really opens up your world. It makes you, I think, naturally a little bit more curious. Oh, I thought everyone spoke the same language, maybe for the younger kids, right? And you get there and you realize, wow, I remember, I'll bring up a kind of a funny example of hosting when I was living in France, one of our American cousins who was going to Europe on, what might be called a classic European rail trip, where they were just going to go from city to city on trains. And her first stop was to visit us. Well, she brought a roll of she brought 12 rolls of toilet paper on the trip over the ocean. And we laughed because why did you do this, Jennifer? Oh, well, we thought that French people didn't use toilet paper. So a funny example of, wow, well, actually, no, maybe back in the day.
That was probably a long time in back in the day. But anyway, that's
A
very
long time back in the day, but a great example of where, until you get to a certain destination, and in particular an international destination, you make assumptions on how things go, and you get there and wow, it's different. And wow, look at those buildings. How could they have made buildings like this? I mean, if you go to Egypt and you look at the pyramids, or if you go to some places in England and you look at the different castles, and you really have to wonder, wow, how did they do it? And I think it's humbling to learn about all the different ways people live. And I think if you don't hit the road, if you take the counter example, if you're not or if if you're not fortunate, or if you choose not to open up your world through travel, I think naturally you might have a tendency to think that everything is the same, that your way is better. And I love traveling, and I love inviting the kids to see new places, because it just puts things into perspectives. It creates new relationships, new friendships. And how cool is it for children to say they have a friend in Morocco, they have a friend in Canada, and maybe, who knows, even though we're in the digital era, the concept of a pen pal, I think, is still something we should be looking at. And I think, again, opening your world to others, opening yourself to other opportunities, is why one of the main reasons why I love not just working in this industry, but traveling myself with my family. And at times, as when Lighthouse goes on medical missions with a purpose, if I can help along the way with the tips that I've learned over the years, I certainly am very, very happy to do so. It makes me makes me happy to help people travel.
It's a great answer. I have to say, for me personally, my answer to that is it really expands my mind. Every time I go on a trip wherever, place I haven't been to in particular, I find that I am utterly fascinated by everything, the architecture, the food, of course, the way
Of
people
course.
live, the language, everything. And I've been fortunate to spend a lot of time in Africa, and I have to say that just the fact that there are people around the world living very different lives than I know and I grew up with, and I just I find that I think it enriches me and it gives me a better understanding of this beautiful, beautiful world that God created. Um, Last question I want to ask you, Chris, is I'm watching our time here, and we're gonna finish off in a second, but we're coming out of the pandemic. I think we're back on the road. Most people are getting on the road, thankfully. I'm happy about that. What kind of things can you see that have changed, and that kind of tips you can give people in terms of traveling as the pandemic closes down here?
Yeah, that's a great question, Dr. Bob, and something you and I discussed that we should touch base on this because it's important. Our industry went from a record year in 2019 to zero in 2020, specifically around mid-March 2020. And so the experience now that the majority of it is thankfully behind us, and even in countries that were extremely shy on reopening borders, it's now happening with China as I think the most extreme example of where lockdowns continued up until just last week. It's different in some regard, and it's very similar in others. It's different in the fact that, like we shared notes a few moments ago, I think the disruption, ramping back up from the pandemic has been more prominent than before. Not to say that disruption didn't exist before, but I think the awareness and the reality of disruptions has been higher. So people are a little bit more, whether it's leisure or corporate, have been putting a lot more purpose around why and when and where should we go, or should we just jump on a Zoom call. So the ramping up has been very interesting, and what I think has not changed, and where I think the hope that while of course respecting the environment and doing what we can to travel in a clean way, so to speak, I think what we've noticed is people cannot find the same experiences. They can't expand their minds, to use your expression, or open their world's mind through a screen. As much as you and I are having I think a very fruitful conversation right now, the digital experience is different from the in-person experience. And man, as soon as the restrictions were lifted, you saw reservations just skyrocket. Primarily family members who wanted to see each other and who couldn't for a long time. But even in the business space, going to visit your client, your team member, your colleague, hearing someone on a stage with a live voice, so you could then meet them in the hallway and say, "I loved what you shared," and maybe share a meal or have a drink, or get to know them outside of typically what a screen can offer, has given us hope that people will always want, we're social beings, and they're always going to want to spend time with each other. And while the digital solutions that we're given have their advantages, I'm one to advocate for, hey, if there's an opportunity to meet someone that you want to, or discover a culture that interests you, it cannot be done through a screen. Get on the road, turn the phone off, unplug, and I'm very hopeful through people who make the decision, parents in particular, to see that they want to do the same. And I think travel is definitely here to stay.
Yep. No, I think you're right. And there's nothing like human to human contact. We need each other. We are social creatures, and Zoom is great, but it will never ever substitute for real life interaction. Okay. Well, listen, Chris, thank you for sharing that. You've been a tremendous guest today. I hope that our listeners have garnered some valuable information that they can put to use. And I want to thank you, Chris Lefevre, for taking the time to actually spend time with us today. And friends, you have been listening to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. So appreciate you being here on the show with us today. And until next time, be well. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your day. Tune in again next week on Apple Podcast. Rate and comment and tell a friend.